So, okay, for the notice, this is the Board of Education reorganization and regular business meeting for which adequate notice under the Open Public Meetings Act was provided by written notice on January 8th, 2018, to the Courier News, the Echo Sentinel, the Star Ledger, Tap into Warren, and the clerks of the Borough of Watchung and the townships of Greenbrook, Long Hill, and Warren. We stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And we'll move to the election results. We had 3 board members currently sitting that ran unopposed. Mr. Hunsinger, Ms. Ober, and Dr. Shabilsky all won their seats, and the vote totals are listed. And the next item on the agenda is the oaths of office. So I'm going to start with Mr. Hunsinger. I will ask you to stand and raise your right hand. I'll stand too. You have your oath. Can you please put your right hand up?
I, Barry Hunsinger, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and this state, under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Barry Hunsinger, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of the Board of Education, and I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Congratulations, Barry. And I'll ask Mrs. Ober if you can stand up and raise the right hand and read your oath.
I, Susan Ober, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
Susan, turn that way so she can get a picture.
Oh.
And take your glasses.
You can't read it.
Oh, no, what to do. State of New Jersey. And that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and in this state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Susan Ober, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of a Board of Education, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Congratulations. And last but not least, Dr. Shabilsky.
I, Gregory Shabilsky, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Gregory Shabilsky, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of a Board of Education, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Congratulations. All right. Rolling right along. So I'm going to make a roll call. Ms. Barone?
I'm here.
Ms. Demizio?
Here.
Mr. Fahey? Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Here.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Here.
Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Here.
And Dr. Shabilsky.
Here.
Okay, one thing that I do want to, before I get into the election of the president piece, just to point out to the board, on the organization agenda, we made one error. Letter R, and Bob was nice enough to point this out. On letter R, we mistakenly wrote the program of studies for 1920. That should be 2018-19. Yeah, so we were a year off.
I didn't point it out, but somewhere in there was February 31st also.
You didn't hear about the new map?
We're adding days to the year because we have to have
Was that a board meeting date?
You know, it wasn't,
Let's keep that as board meeting date, please. I think
no, I think it was
It's how
one
to
of
handle the
the,
snow days.
I think it's our retreat date.
I think it was one of the, when we talked about the school activities or school events.
That's a good
Okay.
idea.
That's pretty funny.
All right, so anyway. So let's move into the election of the president. I want to open the floor for nominations for the position of board president. Do we have a motion for anyone?
I move to open nominations.
Second.
Do we have a motion for a board
Oh,
president?
I think that was already moved.
Okay, I nominate Peter Fallon.
Second.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Hearing no further names, we have a motion to close the nominations.
Move to close.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
No.
Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. We have a roll call for Mr. Fallon as board president. Okay, Ms. Barone,
Yes.
Ms. DeMizio.
Yes.
Mr. Fahey? Oh, sorry. He's not here. Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
No.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
And Dr. Shabilsky?
No.
Okay, motion carries. Mr. Fallon, you are the president.
Okay, I'll open now for nominations for the election of vice president.
Just have a personal policy against people having more than 1 year in a row.
Okay, I nominate
I
Peter
won't
Fallon.
run, I won't be at this one.
Seconded by Mr. Hunziger.
I'm sorry.
I
was
nominate
Lisa.
Peter Fallon.
Thank you.
No. Are there any other nominations for vice president? Hearing none, will someone move to close nominations?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Stiles, would you take the vote for vice president?
Okay, for vice president for Ms. Barone. Rita, Mrs. Barone?
Yes.
Ms. DeMizio?
Yes.
Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
And Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
Okay. Carries.
Okay. Moving on to item 9 on the agenda.
Sure. Are we moving
A through
S?
S?
Are we moving S? Is there any point?
No, let's do A through R.
Okay. I'll move A through R.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on any of the resolutions A through R?
I just have a question. I can't find the board meeting calendar. This was, it's in there somewhere,
It was
right?
one of the attachments in our.
No, I still have to
report.
say, I don't know what letter it is.
It's
but-
item B.
Okay. Why, do we always meet once in September? Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't remember that. That's all.
Any other discussion on resolutions A through R? Mr. Stiles, can we have a vote?
Ms. Barone?
Yes.
Ms. DeMizio?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Okay, motion's carried.
Okay. With respect to Resolution S, I'm going to ask each of you to send an email to Liz and to me indicating which positions you're able and willing to take on, and also your committee assignments you will request for the upcoming year, and we will promptly fill those and seek approval of the board at the next meeting.
With regard to negotiations committee, is that something, since we've already
I-
begun, that you wouldn't change?
Yeah, I do
You-
not intend to
okay,
change that.
Okay, just making sure.
So and I just want to actually ask a clarifying question, and I should remember this from year to year, but are we going to
tentatively lay those out prior to the next meeting so that we can have committee meetings before the work session meeting in February?
I would
Is that
ask if everybody could email me by Monday. We will go ahead and have these tentatively laid out so that meetings can be scheduled, subject to changes being made at the next meeting.
Can I make some clarification about those positions, as Bob would know? So representative to New Jersey School Boards Association or the County School Boards Association, the meetings are open to anyone who wishes to attend, so you don't necessarily need to be a representative to attend. And even the delegate assembly, we do just have one member that votes, but anyone can attend to observe the proceedings.
Or as an alternate.
Excuse me?
Or as an alternate.
Yeah, and I would also like to remind everybody that there is a Somerset County School Boards Association meeting next, well, on Monday the 14th. 14th?
14th.
14th. It's going to be at the Somerset County Vote Tech. There's going to be a presentation on trends in health benefits from Brown & Brown, and a presentation by Gwen Thornton on running the meetings more efficiently and our roles as board members. You can sign up, and usually the dinner at the school board's meeting that is held at the Somerset County Vote Tech is usually quite good.
Is it in Trade Winds?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
that's
it
nice.
is.
Like, and the kids are-
And
that's
it's the
nice.
students prepare and serve the meal, and it's, I can say this, a step up from going to,
Maggiano's, Chick-fil-A.
The talent show.
Okay.
Oh, that's in our,
So do we have to
that's in
like
our,
table S
So
essentially?
that,
Or-
what does that mean?
it's not on
or
the
is
agenda.
it-
Yeah,
So
okay.
just-
Okay, so it automatically tables, okay.
Yeah.
That's just,
Executive session. I will entertain a motion in accordance with the provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, be it hereby resolved that the board move into executive session for purposes of discussing, are we not doing this time?
No, you're good.
Confidential personnel matters, an HIB matter, after which action will be taken. It is expected that the matters discussed in executive session will be made public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? We're now back in public session. Before we get into the work session agenda, I first of all want to thank all my fellow board members for having completed the board self-evaluation. We didn't ask Susan to do one because she just joined us in October, but everyone else has got theirs in, and Gwen Thornton is busy with them now. She gave me some dates today for possible retreats. The dates she gave me are evening dates in February. February 4th, which is a Monday, February 7th, which is a Thursday, and February 27th, which is a Wednesday.
Not that day.
Not that day, okay.
I have tickets to John and Mellencamp, so I'm going there.
Seeing them, not worth it.
Oh, really?
No, he puts on a good concert.
Rita, Gullible, Bruno.
Saw him in San Francisco, actually.
Oh, okay.
But if any of you know your calendars now, fine. If you don't, if you could try and let us know within the next day or so. And also, I asked Gwen to give us evening dates, but if the board wants to do it on a weekend or a Saturday, let me know. I would much prefer myself to do it on a weeknight, as we
Agreed.
have in the past several years, but we're open. The other thing is, I believe we all got an invitation to the staff holiday party, which is January 18th or 19th, whatever that, 18th, the Friday.
MLK.
I saw that, I really did.
I've attended it in the past, as have a number of other board members. You often hear and see teachers talking about their enthusiasm about our students, and in the years when that happens, it's really quite a wonderful thing to see. But I would urge as many as you who have that afternoon free to attend. As you know, we're just starting negotiations, and I don't think it's going to change the course of negotiations, but there's no reason to ignore the holiday party because of the negotiations. Moving on, board correspondence, do we have any? We're in the work session agenda. Tim, do we have any board correspondence?
I have none.
Okay. Brings us to the first opportunity for public comment. Brenda, do you have anything to say to us?
Not everybody jump at once, please.
We'll close the first opportunity for public comment. Do we have any committee reports? I
don't think so.
Can't think of any.
All right, committees.
Nope.
Board discussion items, the only thing that I had was what I said before about dates for the possible retreat. And we are going to try and jumpstart input from the other boards of education, the sending districts, about the possibility of pushing the superintendents into the idea of the shared services, what would work, or what needs there are regarding special ed evaluations and that
We've
sort
been
of
working on
thing.
it, actually.
Yes, the superintendents have already had at least 2 meetings on it, and we're gonna try and push that to keep it going. Yes, Bob?
Have the board presidents met to discuss
We
this?
have not met to discuss it. We were giving the superintendents a chance to have them, to have their first 2 meetings, because they were gonna come back to us with some ideas and our plan. I had talked to 2 of the other board presidents, not all 3, about having a meeting in January to do that. And so now that I'm president again, I will follow up and have that meeting
And
in
there's probably
January.
a few changes in
Yeah.
K-8s on that end anyway, so.
Yeah. Any other board discussion at this point? The rest of the agenda, we've got future action items. So at this point, we want to ask if there are questions regarding A's, B's, or A's, C's, or D's. The C's were discussed in executive session. Hearing, I'm sorry, Greg.
Hearing none, but seeing one.
Seeing one.
Um,
I'm a little
This is
slow.
probably directed to Tim, A5 and 6, the undercharges. If you could just give a little information about why that happens, how often that happens, reasonable, unreasonable.
Yeah, I really hate this.
I know, that's why I want you to comment on it.
Yeah, but basically, after the certified audit of these private schools, if the cost per their pupil is different than the actual, it's kind of almost like we do at Greenbrook. We have an estimated amount and then the actual amount. It always seems to be an undercharge that we got to pay somebody, which drives me nuts. But they, in these particular cases, these numbers are reasonable. The one thing we did challenge was, I think it was the first one, was where they had numbers for the aid. And we went through the contract language. They are allowed to audit the aid coverage too, which also drove me nuts. So, I mean, these are small amounts, but I don't care for it. I really don't. I think we pay enough to the private schools, but
But it
I'll
is
leave it at
something
that.
that we see
It's
year in and year out.
every
in
year,
terms
once a
of
year,
It gets
it happens.
audited and there's an adjustment one way.
once a year.
Usually
And most
in
of
the
them are
wrong
small
direction.
like this. I have never seen a large one that really kind of drove me nuts, but,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
And I think, Peter,
Yes.
you have something, D8, I don't know what this is, I spoke with Liz about this a little bit, with the architecture group, what will we be approving? What is with the project? Where are we going with this?
What this is the project that we've been kind of talking about a little bit. I don't know if you were at the last meeting.
No, I was
Okay.
not, I missed.
Okay, so what we were talking about in operations, and we talked to the board, is we're looking to do a referendum project similar to the turf field project, wherein we're actually going to referendum essentially to get the debt service aid. And we're going to use our local capital reserve to pay the local share. So we're not going to raise taxes. But that's the only way you can get that debt service aid. And the project that we're doing is where we're sitting right now. This is the big, large part of it. If you remember in the architecture plan, which is in your.
Yeah, I
thing.
have,
Okay.
yes.
So we're converting this media center into an interactive, what's the name for it?
Learning Commons.
Learning Commons. So it, I mean, you can look at more of the details. I think the architects presented a little bit on it. But in there, you can see the details. And it's also, included in that is an electrical upgrade in the south building. That's a smaller component. The largest piece is this. It encompasses not only this room, but if you can visually,
I recall the presentation, so I have a question on the scope, because did we agree that we were doing everything they said? It was very ambitious, so I don't know what we're buying here.
the only thing you're doing right now is agreeing to have them as an architect, and these are the costs of the items. The only thing that you're really going to commit to at this point would be the pre-referendum fees. The other items, you know, that's something
Well, if it's
we should
I'm sorry.
we can probably take a look at, like, you know, all of these items are in that plan. So we had some landscaping to be done on the exterior over by the band field. The cafeteria that wall's literally gonna be out of there, there's gonna be a cafeteria. We hadn't settled in on the entire project with the board.
But if it's a smaller project, these fees would be reduced, because are we doing a cafe in the media center? I mean, is that something everybody thinks is a good idea, as an example?
It's it's in the plan.
Oh, this guy, you know, we saw the presentation, and to me, it's not what the board wanted, this is what they came up with. They just come up with these bells and whistles all around the school, these great plans, and are we buying it wholesale? I don't know. I don't know what input the board has had. What have we agreed on, in particular with the media center?
I don't think we agreed on anything.
No,
I
we
think the
didn't.
only thing we agreed on was to go to referendum for money.
Right, but now we're agreeing to pay these fees, but doesn't it depend on the scope of the project?
This is for the entire project. The
Right,
fees
which we
are.
may not do, so who's gonna decide what we do?
Well, but you still own the plans, no matter what. So you know, if the board, you know, what I would tell you, the two things that you absolutely want to commit to is the pre-referendum fees, the design documentation, and the bidding fees. But beyond that, that's the extra stuff. I mean, administration and closeout fees, you're eventually going to have to pay. But the furniture design, we can do that. I
But to
would
Lisa's-
recommend it.
I'm sorry, but to Lisa's point, we're paying for a design fee, but we haven't, as a board, decided
Which design?
what avenue we're gonna go down, so what are they gonna design to?
And if I can follow up on that question, if we as a board decide we're gonna do certain of these projects because that's what we think we can afford to raise, are we still looking at this same design and bidding fees if they're not gonna have as many elements in them as they?
Well, I think that's the basic piece, though. That part's the basic piece. I don't like the extra items to me, but the landscaped architectural service fee, that's the exterior,
Okay, but what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is
I think that's Lisa.
we're paying them for design and doing the bid documents
Mhm.
for exactly what? Right now, there's the whole range of everything they wanted to, but if we're gonna do less than that, why should we pay them to design the things and to put into bid documents the things that we're not gonna include in the bid?
no. those
Well, I
are-
paid to have them design a Cadillac, but I'm only gonna spend the money for a Chevy.
I thought it was
Yeah,
a
that's-
Yugo.
Yeah, I drive.
That too.
Well, the question I have is, if we are paying them to design and we choose to have less, are these fees going to go down?
Nope.
In
Well,
accordance?
that's a very good question. And that's something that,
You know,
So it's
if we
not
Can it be
decide-
not to
you really
exceed?
don't wanna go
Can they
down.
be not to exceed? That's the question.
Well, I think we need,
And that way, we're just,
Well, let me do this. Let me go back to the architect. The one, and again, to me, I think the thing that, the two things that I felt that we had, that you really want to commit to is the pre-referendum fees and the design and documentation and bidding fees. I can get clarification on the question you had, if the scope of the project drops, because this was based on a percentage of the project, which was they estimated at 3.54 million. So this was based on a little less than 6% of that.
and if the referendum fails, right, we're in a different position too, right?
If the referendum fails?
But it's one of those, net no cost referendum.
Oh, so it shouldn't.
So it's not, we're not going to the
Okay.
public for
Right.
the
Okay,
funds.
that's right.
It's like the turf
Right.
field.
Right.
We're doing the same thing that we did for the turf
But
field.
you'll be hit with the pre-referendum fees regardless.
Right,
Can you
yeah.
separate that
Is
out
that-
in a
all
separate
right,
item?
let's
But
try to do
that's-
one at a time. Greg has been trying to ask a question.
So I guess I'd look at it from a bigger scheme of things. We've talked about multi-year plan and prioritizing one project over another, and if I can rephrase Lisa's concerns, it's where does this fit in terms of other things that we need to do? I mean, we've seen things every year, tennis courts, poor example, but an example that I've seen every year that I've been here for half a dozen years. Is this such a priority that it rises above and beyond the rest? I completely agree with trying to capture savings from a referendum for things that are high priority. I don't have a good sense of where this fits in that ranking of priority.
So we can follow up on that discussion of both Operations and Education Committee. So the architects in the plan that they presented, just so everyone knows, as a reminder, it's not that they said, oh, here's what we think you should do. They had a number of meetings with us where we gave them, where we talked about the strategic plan and the different goals we had for the district and the different innovative projects that we were looking to do with the learning spaces. And obviously, if you remember at last year's board meeting, we had some staff members who did a presentation on Learning Commons because they had done research on that last year, because it is something we've been, well, it was the makerspace, the Learning Commons, and actually that's how this conversation has evolved, because we initially started the conversation talking about a makerspace, and what it evolved into, what we realized is really more practical for a high school and for our district is not just creating one makerspace somewhere, but creating what we're referring to as a learning commons in the media center, and then creating we have also plans for a STEAM lab in another part of the building. And so in terms of looking at, if you recall too, they prioritized the different levels of projects. Priority 1 are the health and safety, on necessary projects. Priority 2 are not necessarily health and safety issues, but are tied to programmatic goals. And then priority 3 are kind of the nice to haves that we keep not getting to because the money's not there. So in looking at all of the different innovative, learning projects, this was the one that we had presented to the board as what we thought we should tackle first, for a couple of reasons. One is this is a space that gets utilized by the entire school. So it's not like we're, just focusing on one department, but this is a space that the entire school benefits from. It also doesn't disrupt any other learning spaces, so we don't have to relocate folks. It doesn't disrupt classes because we can, the work's obviously in here. And in terms of the feedback from the staff and the students and the parents, if you come in here at any point of the day, it's packed. But the space is not conducive to what the students use it for, because they don't use the library for what they used to use it for. It's really, students are looking more for collaborative spaces where they can access technology, where they can work together. So that's where, why we had put this at the front of the projects. But that doesn't mean we can't revisit that. That was our recommendation to the board, and when we brought that to Operations Committee then brought that to the full board at the meeting, and that's how it evolved into this. That being said, we haven't decided what the plan is going to be, what we're going to be doing, and really the thought was, and we said this to the architects, is they're doing all of these plans now, but most likely it would be in phases. We wouldn't be doing it all at once. The cafe piece, that is a part, that's really phase 2 of the culinary arts project. And we had been looking at other schools and realized that would be a nice feature. We'd been talking about adding a cafe to the culinary arts program. And then when we started talking about the Learning Commons and looking at what other schools are doing, we thought that would be a nice feature to add to this. But knowing that we do have limited resources, limited financial resources, we know that that might not be something we can do right away. And there are other considerations with that. We have to talk to Pontonian,
Right.
look at what our contract says for them. But we thought that it would be better to look at the whole scope right now and get the plans for everything, so that way we can make an educated decision and not just plan for the Learning Commons and next year say, okay, let's look at possibly adding a cafe, and now let's see what that entails. So that's where that came from. So that's kind of a review of where we're at, but that doesn't mean we can't revisit it before committing to this.
And I will add to that, that in the operations committee, and I'll ask Bruce and Greg to correct me if the recollection is different, Barry, that we had preliminary discussions about this type of referendum that we're doing, where, as Bob said, we're not asking to raise taxes, but funding the local portion with our own surpluses. That puts a limit on how much we can get into this project. So some things might get in, some things might not. And we had some preliminary discussions in the operations committee about which ones might get in. We shared that with the board, but there's been no final decision nor final recommendation. The part that I'm confused about right now is, and it may be that Tim will come back and tell us after he talks to the architect, that this $215,000 in design fees is for just the elements that we talked about fitting within that referendum, or if it's for everything. That's the clarification, at least one of the clarifications that we need before we vote on this and go forward at the next meeting.
Well, it's the basic project, so I mean, they differentiated everything out, that were like landscaped architectural service fee, that's that outdoor cafe space that they were talking about. The furniture is the change of all the furniture into something much more modern than what it is right now. And the cafe is the cafe on that side, right by the foods lab, that's just on the other side of that wall. So they really take that wall out, and the cafe would be on that side over there, and it would extend to the exterior. Those two costs are the extra ones, the landscape, the furniture, the cafe. The digital bidding is just something that I like to add in because it's better for I can get more responses. It's easier for the vendors, the contractors in this case. But that's what I was saying, that those, anything beyond the construction administration and closeout fees, those are all the extra items.
Okay.
That if we were gonna phase something in, we would probably phase those items in. You know, the cafeteria is the
Okay,
The
but
costly
you
one.
will still talk to them again before the next operations and at committee meetings
right.
about those fees to give us a more detailed
Yeah,
understanding?
I'll get more information, I'll get more specifics from Steve on these. I know, and again, I had multiple conversations with Steve regarding, because I said, look, when the board sees the amount of these fees, guys, I'm gonna get some questions. So,
Didn't want to disappoint you.
yeah, you guys never do. So I will provide specifics from Steve. I mean, if you want, I could try to get him out prior to any operations, or prior to a vote, so he can, I mean, it's probably better to hear from him than it is from me, so you can.
We may want to do that.
But is operations, my question is the priority of the projects, that was discussed in operations committee also, correct?
Briefly, yes.
Okay, so is that gonna be rediscussed in operations committee, or are we second guessing that the first thing on our list of priorities is the media center?
I cannot answer on behalf of the operations committee
All right,
at this
so,
point.
all right,
So
okay, because I think the reason it got here on the agenda was that the administration thought that was the first priority, that we had kind of consensus on, not necessarily that we voted on it, but there was a consensus during one of our discussions about
I
this.
think that's right.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, and based on what the superintendent articulated, there's other, like the STEAM lab project was another one we were looking at, but the problem with that, it's more complicated. It involves multiple places in the building and multiple classrooms, so it was more difficult for us to plan and do it that quickly. So,
Bob?
So I'm not sure how this gets to operations and education prior to the next board meeting, because this is a preview item, right, for
Yes.
the next board meeting. So, and I don't know how time-sensitive this is either. But from my position, you know, I know that we talked in general at the last board meeting about the referendum and how this would work, and the theory of what it was
But we
going to
didn't get
support.
into nitty-gritty.
But I think that, you know, I don't know what we're paying for. I mean, other than the concept of a media center, but clearly there have been discussions about what exactly that means, and I think that, as I understand it, as I'm hearing the discussion, that lack of clarity is what's raising all the questions right now, not a lack of support.
Because I was just going to ask the scope of the project, can there be some, we find out what that is exactly, what the details of the, if we're going to decide on what the scope is.
What this includes is basically
Right,
what
if
you're.
we're going to decide on the scope, we'd have to know what it
Yeah.
includes.
Sure. We'll have a conversation with the architect.
And it actually might be worthwhile to have them speak to both operations separately, but operations, so we don't have a quorum, but operations committee and education
Well,
committee.
even if they don't, I would accept that the operations committee wanted to make that presentation, I don't know how everybody else
Well,
feels. But if they would obtain the details, then if they wanted to make the presentation, that's fine, too. As long as it gets back to the
But
board, the
I
details.
certainly would want to, from an education committee standpoint, I think we would want to understand how is this
What
going
the
to impact the
elements, yeah.
educational.
What the curriculum
you know,
impact
It's
is.
great that we're doing the things to the building, but what does that mean for students? You know, I think
Right.
that's where the
Well,
questions
the
are.
architect doesn't tell us that.
Well, that's.
No, you won't.
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we can talk about in that committee.
Right, once we know the details
That's,
of the project.
that's a bit of the, and that's part of the challenge with trying to plan this out appropriately, because we need to do this to be able to plan more of that, but we have to spend a certain amount of money in order to be able to start planning
It's
to
like,
finalize
great,
those
I wanna
details, so.
put an addition on my house,
Yeah.
and I want this room, and this room. Here, architect, design something for
And-
me. That's what this is. This is, I want a media center. Here, architect, design something for me. It costs money to do that, to get into the project. The question is, can we design it ourselves, or can we kind of tell them what we're looking for before they design it?
Well, that's what we've been doing. That's
I
really.
don't think that's the question at
Yeah,
all.
that's what we've been doing, but I think, so education committee wants a more detailed discussion about what we're looking to actually do programmatically with the things in that facilities plan. And then operations committee would like more of a description on what these fees actually involve.
Right.
Well, as just a board member, I'd like to know, again, the specifics of the project.
Yeah.
Should we leave it at the large thing? Do we want to narrow it? So we need the specifics. And-
I think in operations, when we get the pieces of it, I think
then
that
bring it
goes to
back.
that. And I think the education
Right.
committee's portion of how it impacts programmatically, I think the two of them together will
That's the
hopefully
concept,
give us
so.
enough information.
And the
to-
question, I guess, for the architect too, is if we decide, what are the disadvantages to, if we know some of these projects are things we may want to add on eventually, is there a disadvantage to not doing the design now? Are they gonna tell us, yes, it's gonna cost a lot more, or, you know, we need to do it now in concert to make sure it's aligned, or no, we can cross those out and worry about that later?
What I would suggest is, once the committees are formed, I'll have the architects out for both.
Greg?
So to dovetail to Bob's comments, I think it would be important to understand the timing necessity of this. So he asked the question of, is it time sensitive or not? Do we have to submit something in order to take advantage of the discounted savings, if you will, by next board meeting, the board meeting after that? How time sensitive is it? And for me, again, to reiterate, what's most important is the prioritization of this project versus other projects, and some clarity as to why this is the most important thing to spend that money on. Because if $250,000 for planning only is a big chunk of change.
Yes,
It is. Yeah, if we were to look at a September referendum, it would be a little more time sensitive. It depends on what date we would do the referendum. September, we would have to move quicker, obviously, because there's lots of planning. You got to get state approvals. And so it
So
takes
this
some
would be,
time.
construction would be the following summer?
The following summer. But the planning, the referendum takes
Right.
time, and they got to get out in front of it.
So this is not a situation where we have to have something done by February, or we lose the opportunity to request the state aid, debt service aid.
Well, if you have a September referendum, it would be tight.
Yeah.
You may have to.
Okay.
But there's no law requirement that you have to do a September
Okay,
referendum.
so sooner is better, but we're not facing an imminent
No.
drop-dead deadline.
And if the board isn't comfortable with
Yeah.
it, you should really,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
it is a lot of money to spend.
What are our options for the timing for the referendum vote? Are there certain
There's,
months,
I think
right?
there's 3 days. I think it was
September,
September.
December?
I thought November was one, and then there was
Okay.
one in
March.
January.
Okay.
Where's our
Is
board
November
attorneys?
part of the regular election cycle?
I think so.
Yeah, there is one in January because the Warren.
Or is it
Warren
December? No, it is
Township K-
December. It is
Warren
December.
Township K-8 has a vote on January 22nd.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the preview items? We're at page 11, action items, Roman numeral 7.
Mr. President, I'd like to move items A1 through A4.
Thank you,
Second.
thank you. Discussion on action items, resolutions A1 through A4. Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, Mr. Stiles?
Ms. Barone?
Yes.
Ms. Mizio?
I'm abstaining on A1 and A2, and yes to A3 and A4.
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Abstention on A1 and A2, and then yes on everything else.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Abstain A1, A2, yes on the rest.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Sober?
Yes.
And Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. President, I'd like to move items A5 through A8.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Barone. Any discussion of resolutions A5 through A8? Hearing and seeing none, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Barone?
Yes.
Mr. Mizio?
Yes.
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Ms. Ober?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Mr. President, I'd like to move items C1 through C6.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Barone. Any discussion of resolutions C1 through C6? Hearing and seeing none, could we have a roll call vote? Mr. Stiles?
Ms. Barone?
Yes.
Mr. Mizio?
Yes.
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Sober?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Mr. President, I'd like to move items D1 through D4.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mizio. Any discussion of resolutions A1 through, I'm sorry, D1 through D4? Hearing and seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Stiles?
Ms. Barone?
Yes.
Mr. Mizio?
Yes.
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Sober?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Now at the second opportunity for public comment. I will open it. Way to be.
The robotics kickoff is on Saturday, and robo raffles at 1 o'clock.
Thank you. Ms. Nemchuk. Now, I will now close the second opportunity for public comment and open other business. Anybody? Dr. Shabilsky?
Just wanted to make a public comment. I didn't want a misperception of a no vote on your presidency to be an implication that there's not support around the table. People who've known me for a while have known that I think from a personal standpoint that that role should be something that's shared among different board members, that it should be a one-year term and then an opportunity given to somebody else, and that was the only reason that I voted no. I just wanted to be clear on that.
I don't think anybody else wanted it.
I appreciate the remarks, and as the superintendent can tell you, I have spent the last couple of weeks hoping that my term of service as president was over and that somebody else was going to be nominated. But I appreciate the remarks, Dr. Shabilsky.
Thank you.
Any other business? If not, Bruce, you want to make, I'm sorry, Bob?
First of all, I want to concur with Dr. Chabelsky. The reason for my vote was exactly the same. That's the philosophy of which we had approached this, so it was not a reflection on your candidacy, but the philosophy behind people serving single terms and then moving on. The point I want to raise is back to the faculty climate survey.
Yes.
And I know that there was some discussion about that we've had previously, and questions about the validity of such surveys and things of that nature. And I just wanted to bring to the board's attention, after going to several sessions and talking to lots of other board members and folks that are expert in this area, one of the key items of high-performing boards is the fact that they will actually go forward with faculty climate surveys that are done in an anonymous fashion. Whrhs provides a survey for the state of New Jersey. Ohio has another model that is used for faculty and staff culture and climate surveys. And it is a best practice to annually conduct these and share that information both with the board and the public. And given the fact that we've not had any meaningful discussion on these surveys in the past 3 years, and there's been question regarding the validity of those surveys, I really think the time is right for us to actually do a legitimate faculty and staff culture and climate survey prior to the end of this year, so that we have good information that we can use to make sure that we are creating the right kind of environment, not only for our students, but for our faculty members as well.
And I will tell you, in the late part of 2018, I had a couple of discussions with the superintendent asking that information be gathered so that we could have a board discussion about conducting a climate survey and what the cost might be and how it might be designed. And it's my understanding that the superintendent's already started that and will be getting back to us so that we can, as a full board, have a discussion of just what you're asking for, whether we go forward with an anonymous climate survey for us to then use.
My understanding, though, is that most climate surveys, they're school climate surveys. It's not a staff climate survey. That's any, research I've done, it's a school climate survey. So I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. It's everything from the school environment, safety, services provided, it covers everything.
There are models out there that do all or individual aspects of it. So it can be as limited as a faculty survey, it can be a faculty and student survey, it can be a faculty, student, and community survey. There's all sorts of different flavors. And I'm not suggesting that, we do one over the other, but I do think that it's important that, given what we have been receiving recently, that whatever it is that we do, include the faculty component.
So
in
this
my
would be a
opinion.
good thing probably for the board retreat to talk about,
Yeah.
I would think.
I would echo Bob's comments. I think it is easy to dismiss a survey by saying it's not valid and not reliable, but I think if that's truly the case and people believe that, then another step needs to be taken. And ideally, it would be a collaborative effort with the faculty to come up with a survey that everyone agrees is going to be reasonable, provide us with valuable information. And I don't think it has to be restricted to faculty. I think faculty, students, and parents would be important to include in that, so that at some regular interval, no different than we every 3 years look at professional services, should we be doing the same thing in an agreed manner that's valid to just get feedback? How are we doing? What can we do better? And that's part of our responsibility.
I mean, that's, the timing is appropriate for that too, as we're planning for, our next strategic planning phase, so that certainly makes sense.
Thank you. And Bob, thank you also for your comments, and I will also say publicly that when I was asked last year to stand for president, I agreed also, when it was, the philosophy of serving as 1 year was explained to me. I had no problem with that, and I was fine, and I would have happily given up the gavel this year. But thank you for your remarks. Any other business? Hearing none.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you. Mr. Martins.